Hi, this is Patsy with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And we have so many stories today. Dennis J. Henson he's collected a whole bunch of them. I don't know how long he's been doing this, but it is certainly lots of fun. Dennis, I love this book. It is so much fun. I've had so much fun. I don't know. It's for daily inspiration. I don't know how many stories you have in there. Sometimes I read a whole bunch of them at once and I reread them because just when I need a little bit more inspiration, I find something in this book. It is a wonderful book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words. I really had a good time putting it together, and I sure hope it helps a lot of people.
I think it will because sometimes we just need a moment of inspiration, one little story that just gives us some hope in this world. And of course, that comes from reading. And so I loved that you had at the beginning of your book, you had something from Nikola Tesla. And he said, "Of all things, I like books best." I agree with him because that's how I've always felt. Books are, for me, that's everything. I've been reading since I was 3 years old, and I never get tired of reading. It's always just a joy for me to pick up a book. And particularly a book like this. I think everybody should have this book. This interview is a little bit after Christmas, but we're starting the new year. And everybody, if you want to get a wonderful gift for somebody, if you've gone through Christmas and you think, oh, I should have given somebody something, give this book real impact because it is really, you have a daily inspiration and it's just fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to start with one of my favorite stories for several reasons. One, because it's about Henry Ford, and I was raised in Detroit, and we were surrounded with Henry Ford. And I love this little story. I just thought it was so good. Here we have Henry Ford, and he, of course, was very rich. Everybody knew about him. And tell us about Martha Berry.
Martha Berry was a young lady who had just graduated from college. This was in the early 19th century, very early. And she went back home to Rome, Georgia, in northwest Georgia, in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And her father owned a large plantation, and she was happy, but she saw that all the children in that area had no place to go. There were no schools at that time. So she started teaching a few of the children. She wanted them to have an education. And so when the people in that area found out that she was teaching for free, more and more students came. And it finally got to the point where she just couldn't afford. She built a little schoolhouse, and the children would bring money. Not, I mean, they would bring something to barter. They didn't have any money, so some of them would bring eggs and some potatoes, and one family brought their milk cow and let the students milk the cow. So she knew she couldn't continue, but because more and more students continued to come in, she just was running out of money. So one day a little boy came in and said, "Miss Berry, you need to get in touch with Henry Ford." And she said, "Why?" "I read in this paper that he's very rich and he gives money to people who need it. And Miss Berry, I think we need it." She agreed, and she took the paper and wrote a letter to Henry Ford asking him to help her. She explained her plight, what she was trying to do. She said, "I just need a little bit of money to help so I can teach more children." By the time he received the letter, he was older, and he'd become a crusty old business owner, and everyone was asking him for money. So he wrote a letter back and said, "I appreciate your plight. Here's my donation." And he sent her a dime, 10 cents. And
Oh,
so at that point, she had a choice. She could have just taken the 10 cents and spent it and forgot about it, but she decided to try something else. So she took everything that she had available to her, her father's plantation, the children who were willing to help her out, her education about farming because she had grown up on a plantation. And she went to Rome to a seed company and purchased 10-cent bag of peanuts. 10 cents worth of peanuts. Now, this was in 1900 or close to 1900, and 10 cents was a reasonable amount of money. She got a pretty good size bag of peanuts for that. And so then she went back and she met with her students and she said, I've got a project for you, but you all have to accept that you'll work on the project. And in addition to that, you still have to do your homework, you still have to clean the school, you still have to do everything you've been doing. You have to do your chores. And every student said, we'll do it. We'll do it. What is it? So I'm going to shorten the story quite a bit. They took the peanuts and she had them clear out about a seventh of an acre, a small garden, and they planted the peanuts. She told them how to prepare them and put them in the ground and water them and then keep the weeds away. And after the first crop, of course, they had a lot more peanuts. So they did the same thing. She cleaned out an acre of ground and they planted those. And the next crop was very successful. And then they cleaned out 7 acres. they, they planted those. And eventually they had planted about 88 acres from that one bag of seeds. And when they finally harvested, it took several wagon loads of peanuts to go back to the feed store. And after they were weighed, the feed store gave her a check for $1,500. Now, $1,500 in 1903 or 1904, that was a lot of money. So she took it to her bank and she deposited it and wrote a check and a letter, and the letter's in the book. It's the actual letter that she sent to Henry Ford. And it said, here's your $1,500 dividend on your 10-cent investment in Barry's school. So when Henry Ford got that letter and saw that check for $1,500, he took a train to Rome, Georgia to meet this Martha Berry. And he went and he saw the little school, he saw the children working their hearts out, and that they didn't have any money and that they really were anxious to get an education. So before he left her a large donation, a very large donation. And they became friends and remained friends for many years. And every year he continued to donate. So much so that her school grew and grew. And when I graduated from Jacksonville State University, I had one more course I needed to take. And I actually went to Berry College, which is there now, what it had become Berry College over the years. It's beautiful. It's one of the prettiest college campuses I've ever seen. And it's 30,000 acres. It's bigger than Disney World. Can you imagine that? And that all came from a bag of peanuts. So, what if she'd quit when she got the dime back? So, it just shows what, if someone has will and belief and foresight, what can be done with little or nothing. So that's a very inspiring story. And there's a lot more to the story, but I don't think we have time to
No, but
cover here.
it's a story that is so really so beautiful because also when she got the 1,500, she might have said at that point, I can give some to the kids and I can put some in the land and all of that. But the idea that she would send Henry Ford a check and she had there's no assurance that she would ever hear from him again. He might have just, he was a crotchety old guy because living in Detroit, we heard a lot of stories about him and a
Yeah,
lot of people. He was right. And everybody was always trying to get a hold of him. So he might have just put it in his bank. He liked money. So
that's right.
she had to have a lot of faith to do that because, as you said, $1,500 in those days was a lot of money.
It surely was. The underlying theme of the book throughout all the stories and poems and quotes is the acronym DFW. I live in Dallas Fort Worth, so it's easy for me to remember DFW, and then I live in Arlington, so DFWA: desire, faith, will, and action. If you can remember that as you read the book, you'll see that all of these people had those four things. And if you incorporate those four things in your life, you can do tremendous things yourself.
So when did you start thinking about, you've been collecting, these are stories over years and years. So you've just been collecting them. What is what's the background for writing the book?
When I stopped teaching college and went into business, the company that I went to work for gave me three books: Success, the Glenn Bland Method, Think and Grow Rich, and the Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. Og Mandino's story is also in the book. And when I read those books, they changed my life. They just were really inspiring and motivational. I felt euphoria. I couldn't wait to get out and start doing things and making money and being successful. And I was very successful. So that same company would have sales meetings once a year. And the first year they brought in Jim Rohn. Now, at the time, no one had ever heard of Jim Rohn. This was in the 70s. He was just getting started. And so I got to meet him and befriend him, and we talked a lot. And he encouraged everybody to journal. He said, write down everything because you never know when you'll need it, or you can pass it on to your kids. If you go on YouTube and just Google or search for Jim Rohn, you'll find out that he talks about journaling quite a bit. So I started keeping a list of those books. When I'd read a book that really motivated me, I listed it and kept it. Now, I read lots of different books, but I only kept a list of the ones that moved me. It's the same way with the poems and the quotes. So for this 2025 will be 50 years. I've been collecting poems and stories and quotes. And so one day I was on a podcast because I have super successful real estate students that I've taught to do. And so people would invite me on podcasts and they'd say, what makes your students so successful? And my answer was, I have them form success habits. If they'll form success habits, they'll have a hard time failing. So then the host said, Dennis, what's the number one success habit? And I said, form the habit of reading something positive every single day that moves you toward your goal. After that podcast, I thought, wouldn't it be great if there were a tool to help people form that habit? An app or a book. And then it hit me when I said book. I thought, wait a minute. I have all these poems and quotes and stories I've been collecting forever. I can put them together in a book, and people can form the habit even if they don't have much time. If you get home and you're exhausted and you didn't read that day, you can turn to the back of the book and read a quote. It takes 3 seconds or 4 seconds. If you're at the airport and you have 30 minutes, you can read the story of Lincoln or the Martha Berry story, the longer stories. Or if, let's say you have 3 hours to read, I put in the back of the book all of those books that moved me over 50 years. How much would it cost to pay someone to read for 50 years and pick out the best books that will motivate you? I really believe the value of this book is much more than the 35 or 40, how much ever it costs. I think the value of this book is millions of dollars, because in order to get what's in it, if you tried to start from scratch and get what was in it, it would cost you a fortune. And it's available to you today for free. I'm going to give everybody that's listening in an ebook copy because I want to help as many people as I can.
That's wonderful. Exactly. That's what I believe in, that you should be reading and you should be filling your mind with good thoughts. Um, so often lately, there's been a lot of dystopian books are being written and sad books being written. And depressing books being written. And that's why this book, I think, comes just at the right time. We need in 2025. Can you believe it's 2025? Um, and but we need people to have more hope and to have more ambition and to see something as simple as Martha Berry. I just over and over, I've read that story a couple of times because I thought, would I have kept, like, so many people would have taken that $1,500 and gone out and bought a new wardrobe and maybe given some to their church and maybe done this and maybe done that. But to have that brain to think far bigger than other people, which she did, and look at what she accomplished. It's a beautiful story.
Well, thank you. It's one of my favorites. I learned about it in vacation Bible school when I was just a tiny boy one summer.
There are so many. I wanted to, I there's one particular one. I love this story because when I was young and as a little girl, I remember one of the first things I remember about my daddy was that my parents loved to dance and they loved polka. They won actually a dance contest once, and the first prize was a trip to Chicago with weekend with in a fancy hotel in Chicago. In those days, it was after World War II, and it was a big deal to win a trip to Chicago and go to a fancy hotel and food and everything. But the second prize was a dictionary. Now, my mother and father could have won the first prize. They were the best dancers. But my mother wanted that dictionary with the oak stand. She didn't care about going to Chicago. She wanted that dictionary. And that really changed our lives and I think the dynamics of our family. Because once we had that dictionary, she had the dictionary before I was born, and that was a center of our lives. We're always at that dictionary. And we learned so much because of that. And but one of their favorite songs was Beer Barrel Polka. They loved beer. They would dance to that one all almost every weekend. So tell us a little story about that wonderful song.
About Beer Barrel Polka.
Yeah.
That is in the Andrews sisters story about the Andrews sisters. I think the Andrews sisters story is probably the second longest story. I think Walt Disney's the longest, and Andrews sisters. But the Andrews sisters were the top singing group of the 20th century up until the Beatles unseated them. And most people don't know that. They sold between 80 and 90 million records. That's a lot. And it was during the Depression where people didn't have any money and they still bought the Andrews Sisters record. And the Beer Barrel Polka was, I believe it was their second big hit. And they didn't want to do it. When the record studio suggested do Beer Barrel Polka, they said, no, we don't want to do that. It's not sophisticated enough. But they insisted and they did it, and it was their second, I think, golden record. Vermeer Bis Duchesne was first, and I think Beer Barrel Polka was second. And I love the story of the Andrews sisters. It's very long, but it was long on purpose. The book had to have long short stories and short stories and poems and quotes and then a list of books so that people don't have an excuse. If they have this book and they don't form the habit of reading, they don't really have an excuse. They can't say, I couldn't fit it into my day, because you absolutely can fit it into any day, because there's something in there that will fit into any time slot that you have. But if you go to YouTube, you can hear all the Andrews sisters songs. I really didn't get to know them that well until I was researching this book. The way I found it was my wife and I love to watch TV, and she likes girly TV shows, feminine type romance things, and I like mysteries and drama. So I was trying to find something that fit that category, and I remembered hearing the song, and I thought that might be a good movie. It had Sissy Spacek dancing with a broom, and there was a wonderful song in the background, and I thought, I wonder if that was really a World War II song, because it sounded more modern than that. So I looked up Sissy Spacek, and I found the movie. I think it was Raggedy Man, and Norm and I watched it, and I fell in love with that song all over again. When I thought, let me research, maybe these sisters have some other songs. It turns out they had a lot of other songs, a lot of other songs, and I loved them all. So I thought, I wonder if they had any struggles. I wonder if their fame and fortune was just something that just happened. Of course, it wasn't. And they went through so many things. And when they finally broke through, it is so touching that I still can't read it without tears rolling down my eyes. It's so cathartic that it just really hits you. I don't know if you've gotten that far in the
Oh
book.
yes, no, I did. Oh, I feel the same way because my parents played their music over and over. I remember it. It's like part of my whole childhood. In the back of my mind, I can relate to every one of their songs, and their story and the way you write it is it's fascinating. And it's, as you said, it's something that does bring tears to your eyes. But I was so moved by the way you wrote the story.
Well, I had a pretty good, I had something good going for me when I started the book, and that the stories I put in the book were already interesting. I couldn't fail because the stories were wonderful. All I had to do was a little research and write them and maybe tweak them a little bit. So that was a head start. And another thing is, I had over 100 stories, but I couldn't put 100 stories in that book because then I wouldn't be able to put the poems in quotes. It would be too thick and it wouldn't make a great gift. So I had to eliminate about 60 stories. So my criteria was, if it didn't touch you, if it didn't reach into your soul and pluck your heartstring, I didn't put the story in there. So that's why when I talk to people, they say, "Oh, these stories had so much impact." Yeah, I know they had the impact on me, and so I'm just passing it along to the readers.
I again, coming from Michigan, one of the stories I loved was the one, because I've been there many times, the Green Bay, Wisconsin story.
Oh
I thought
yeah,
that was so funny. I got such a kick out of that one.
about the little girl. Her father got the coaching job for the Green Bay Packers. They were terrible. They were so bad that the coach before that had been hung in effigy. And the NFL, it wasn't NFL back then, but the league was about to cancel the Green Bay Packers because they were terrible. They just couldn't win a game. So Vince Lombardi was an assistant coach at New York for the Giants, and he was hired for the game. And he came home and he told his family, "We're moving to Green Bay." So his little girl said, "Where's Green Bay?" He said, "It's in Wisconsin." And she said, "Where's
Where's
Wisconsin?"
Wisconsin? I love it.
So the next day, he brought a map home and he said, "Honey, here's Wisconsin. It's above Illinois. It's over near the Great Lakes." And she said, "Okay, where's Green Bay?" And he looked, and it wasn't on the map. And she said, "I'm not moving to any town that's not on the map." So Vince Lombardi said, "When I get through there, honey, Green Bay will be on every map." And that's true. If you go right now and look at Wisconsin, Green Bay is on, and it's not much bigger than it was at that time, but it's on the map, and he put it on there.
Oh yeah, because how many Super Bowls did they win? Or how many?
I think he won three. He and it came very close, and a couple more. He was an amazing motivator and person and coach. I just loved, and a lot of some of his quotes are in the back of the book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really fantastic what he did with that team, and still, it's funny. People, I was born in northern Michigan in the Upper Peninsula, so people there are still for the Green Bay Packers. But I'm a Lions fan, a Detroit Lions fan. They've come back because they had been on a 50-year losing streak, and the Lions are back. So that's you live in hope. You live in hope. It's all.
There you go.
But now you mentioned your biggest chapter, and that certainly is somebody who inspired you, Walt Disney. Tell us why you were so grabbed with the stories of him and his accomplishments over the years.
The thing, Patsy, is over the years I would see something that would really motivate me. And I was watching TV one afternoon, and there was a short, brief thing about Disney's life, and it was so interesting. I looked on YouTube, I looked everywhere. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I thought, well, what I was watching was just so interesting because he failed and everybody left him and he was there with nothing. And I said, well, I'm going to rebuild this story because I want other people to see this. I spent more time on that story than I did on all of the rest of the book together. And I think it's probably the most interesting. It takes him from his childhood when he was born all the way up through Disney World. He died before Walt Disney World was actually open, but I think he died in '66. It takes him up through his death, and it doesn't follow Disneyland or Disney World after that. But the roller coaster that he lived, the poor guy he was a genius when it came to being creative, but when it came to running a business, if it wasn't for his brother, we wouldn't know the name Disney because he was not a very good businessman. Because over and over, people would steal everything he had. You know, he'd leave himself open and lose everything. And then he would dust his pants off and get up and go again. And his brother would some way find the money. And oh, it's such an interesting story. He almost died twice, came very close to death, just inches of death a couple of times in the story. And then seeing him being taken advantage of and from the depth of despair, that's what was so wonderful about it. He came up with his greatest character, maybe the greatest cartoon character ever. And that was born when he was at his lowest point, when he had lost everything and was very depressed. It's a fun story. I still love to read it, even though I've read it 1,000 times.
I did. I like the story. I didn't know about his travels to Europe and what he found there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
When he started the idea of Mickey Mouse Park, it was a long time before Disneyland. He had the ideas in his mind and what he would like to do. He would take his little girls out, and there wasn't anything to do in California. People would visit there, but it wasn't a very good tourist area because there wasn't that much to do. And a lot of people would ask him, where can I go see your cartoon characters? And he wanted to have a place where they could. So he had a place on his existing lot that was a few acres, and he thought maybe I'll build a little entertainment park there and have the characters go and people can come and see them. And when he was planning to do this, which happened over 15 or 20 years, the Mickey Mouse Park actually never happened, but it never left his mind. And the whole time he was researching. He traveled the world, any place where there was a park of any kind, he would go and take notes. And he would talk with the people that ran the parks, and they would all tell him, "I don't think you should do this. There's not a lot of money in it. You're going to be a big failure. And you're just going to waste your time and money." And even his board of directors had turned it down. They said, "No, you can't do that. It's not a good idea. It's not good business. You'll be risking the money of our people." So, despite his board of directors, he went and started another company separate from the Disney company and started Disneyland with that. And eventually, the old company purchased and bought the existing one in, which was being very successful. He proved them wrong. Even his brother was against it, and his wife. And even against all of the odds, everybody telling him it wouldn't work, his company not funding it, his brother, who was the person who made him possible, was not for it either. And his brother got upset with him when he started another company to do that, which because it took so much of his time away from the original company. But it's certainly an interesting story. And the opening of Disneyland, it was called Black Sunday, I think. It was so, I mean, there were so many problems. It was just terrible. But he got on TV the next day and said, "Oh, we had a few setbacks, but we're going to be fine. Yeah, just make your plans to come on." And within the first year, they did $1 million in business, even though the first day was a total failure. It took 2 or 3 pages to describe what all went bad. It was so bad. But I guarantee you, if you read the story, you'll be surprised. There's things in there about Disney that you had no idea. I mean,
Exactly.
it'll surprise you. I
It
hope
did. There were so many things that I didn't know, and it's so much fun to know them now. We don't have much more time, but are there any a few particular other stories that you would like to tell us about? Your favorite ones?
Betsy, that's like saying which of your
Of your
children is
oh,
your favorite. They all are wonderful, and I didn't put them in there unless they were. Disney, I like the Andrews sisters. The ones we've talked about today, I think maybe the Lincoln story. I can't, it's too long.
it's too long.
When I came in one day and I have a daily list, and it said on my daily list to take the Lincoln story out of the book. It's too short and it really doesn't cover much. Because the reason I put it in there was that I always heard that Lincoln had failed and failed and failed, and he had many times. And I thought I wrote a story, it was like a page and a half. So I thought before I take it out, I really wanted it in there. Why don't I do a little bit of research? So I found something that I thought, wow, this is amazing. Had this not happened exactly the way it did, and there was just one chance in a million that it did, we wouldn't know the name Lincoln. So I thought, I wonder if there's any others. And then I found another one the same way, one in a million chance, and another one, and another. And I think I ended up with around 20 things where if they hadn't gone exactly the way they did, Lincoln wouldn't be a name in our vocabulary. He wouldn't have been a president. It wouldn't have been somebody we even know. He was raised by illiterates. No one in his family could read or write. He only had less than a first grade education. And had his birth mother not passed away, and he got a stepmother who took his education seriously, we would know Lincoln. That was the first step. And the name of the story is Providence. And it said, was Lincoln lucky or was it Providence that he became a president? And when you read the story, you're probably going to come to the conclusion that this guy wasn't lucky. There's no way you can think of Lincoln as being a lucky person. Look what happened to him. But it, him becoming president was more than a miracle. It was a multiple miracles, and it's a
It's a
fun
great
story.
story. We have time for one more story, and we'll do it about a Texan. Now, when I lived in Europe, I owned a white Cadillac, and I drove all over Europe in a white Cadillac. It was part of my sort of gimmick because I had a chain of stores in Europe. But my gimmick was the white Cadillac because, of course, it drew attention wherever. When you're driving a white Cadillac down a narrow street in Rome, people pay attention to you. But let's talk about a woman named Mary, who is Texan, and she had a penchant for Cadillacs too.
Mary's story is very interesting. Her father became very ill when she was young, and her mother had to work. Back then, this was early in the 19th century, around 1920s, the teens. And women didn't work that much, they did housework. And when her mother had to go to work, Mary was 7 years old, and her father was an invalid. So Mary had to do everything. She had to cook and clean and iron. She even did shopping in Houston. She'd catch the bus and go to downtown Houston and do shopping. She's 7 years old. And she would call her mother, who was busy at work, and say, "How do I cook this? Or how do I do this?" And her mother would always say, Here's how to do it. Don't worry, honey. You can do it. I believe in you. You can do it. So Mary was brought up with a great deal of inspiration, motivation from her mother, always believing in her. Her when she graduated from high school, she graduated at the top of the class. She was extremely intelligent, but she couldn't go to college because her family couldn't afford. All of her friends went to college, her Houston friends, big high school, but she got married and had kids and was poor. So one day, when a salesman knocked on the door and had some books for children, she wanted those books for her kids so bad she could taste it. But she had to tell the sales lady, I don't have any money. I can't buy it. The sales lady said, what if I could get them to you for free? Mary said, really? How can that happen? She said, I'll leave these books with you. And over the weekend, you be thinking of some friends and relatives that you might be able to sell them. And if you sell 10 sets, I'll give you a set for free. Mary said, really? So when the sales lady came back on Monday, Mary had already sold all 10 sets. And the sales lady was floored. She said, my goodness, with talent like that, you need to be in sales. So, since books were not a good repeat seller, she was looking for something, and she started working with Stanley Products, and she became their best salesman. And they also let you recruit, and they gave you commission on recruiting, and she recruited a lot of people, and she became their top salesman. So then Stanley decided that she was going to have to move to Dallas, but they were not going to continue to pay her the commission on the people she'd recruited in Houston. She didn't like that, so she resigned and she went to work with another sales company. I think it was World Gifts or something. And she became a super salesman for them and brought in a lot of salesmen. And she got promoted as high as they would promote a woman. And then they started promoting the people under her that she brought in over her. And she didn't think that was fair because she didn't think being a woman was anything that should hold you back. So she quit and decided, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write out all of the things that these companies did right and all the things that they did wrong. And then I'll sell the book, and other ladies will not have that same problem. So when she finished the book, she said, this is really not a book, it's more of a sales manual. She talked to her husband, and they decided to start a little sales company. So her husband was going to run the business part because Mary was not educated in that, and Mary was going to handle the sales and to build the sales organization. And they were in Dallas, and they leased a little 500-foot office space. And a week before they were to open, they invested all of their money. And a week before they were to open, her husband died of a heart attack. So she didn't know what to do. She couldn't do the business part. And her accountants and her attorneys said, look, Mary, you're going to lose everything. You need to just close up, sell everything, let that be bankrupt, and go get a job. Now, Mary just lost her husband. She was mourning her husband. She was about to lose everything. She was at the bottom. Her depression was just so great that when she made the decision, I'm going to go on, her son came to her and he gave her his check. Back then they had a savings. I used to have a savings book. He gave her his savings book, which had $4,500 in it. And he said, Mom, I'd rather invest this with you than anybody else in the world. And that's when she said, I'll do it. And so her son took over the business part, and she started a company that became one of the greatest business enterprises of the 20th century, Mary Kay Cosmetics. That's the first part of the story. The part that you were talking about, the Cadillacs, she wanted to motivate her salespeople, and she kept looking for different things, and it goes through all the different things. And so finally one day the company was doing great. She had a lot of money. and she never could spend it on herself because she didn't have time. She was too busy building her business. So she pulled into the Lincoln dealership and told them that she wanted to buy a Lincoln. And the salesperson said, "Go home and get your husband, and we'll put you in a Lincoln." That was really dumb because Mary was not that a person that you could talk to like that. So she went to the Cadillac place, and they were very nice to her. And she opened up her compact, and she said, "I want to buy that Cadillac right there, and I want it to be this color." It was pink. And so the salesman said, "You want a pink car? Are you nuts? You know, if building one pink car is going to cost you a fortune, and you can't send it back." And she didn't even hesitate. She said, "No, I'll take it." And so they built her a pink car. So when she went back to her office, there were 5 or 6 of her top salespeople there. And when they saw that pink Cadillac, those ladies went crazy. They said, "Oh my God, I've got to have one." And boy, the light went off in Mary's in her head and said, "This is the thing. This is the motivational gift that's going to put us on the map." And it did.
I mean that.
Yeah, pink Cadillacs. If you saw a pink Cadillac 30 years ago, it was an exciting thing. Wow, look at there. There's a Mary Kay Cadillac. That's really
Exactly. That was a sign of real success, and people knew that people, any woman who got that pink Cadillac was a hard-working woman. That's for
exactly.
so it was. I thought it was brilliant. That is just one of the many stories in this book. They are all so good, and I love, of course, as you said at the end, where you have the all of the poems, the quotes, the little just little places that people can just turn to and have a quick and inspirational read. I think it's fantastic, and it will have a real impact. I It's a perfect title. So the book is called Real Impact, and it is really inspirational. And you have a website there. Tell us about that. And again, tell us about how people can get a free copy, a Kindle copy.
Go to realimpactbook.com, and it tells you more about the book. There's a little place there if you want to donate the book to children. 100% of your donation goes to putting this books in disadvantaged communities for child literacy, continuing education for disadvantaged kids. If you want to help with that, I would appreciate it. If you would like the free ebook, scroll down to the bottom and click on the link, put in your name and email, and it will be sent to you instantly. And you'll get it right then. You will not be put on a mailing list unless you click the link that says, "I want to know about your future books." And then you'll only get an email when I've written other books that you might be interested in. So it's not a spamming site or anything, and I won't give your information to anyone else. But I want you to have the book for free because I know if you read it, you're going to see the potential. You're going to want to give it to high school and college graduates. It's a very affordable gift. And the deluxe copy is a very nice book. It is beautiful. I was doing a podcast with a person who prints books, who publishes books, and he held my book up and he said, "This is the nicest book I've ever seen." Wow, that's pretty amazing for to get that kind of a recommendation. And another thing, if you ever want to make someone's day, I like to do that. If you have a book that you just read, my book or someone else's, go to Amazon, find the book, and give them a rating. Give them a 5 star and say something nice about their book. You'll be helping them and you'll be helping other people find good books to read. So that's important to make people happy. I think that's important and to change people's lives. And if you give this book to the right person, it will change their
Really,
life.
really
So
can.
you,
I've already decided on the people I'm sending it to because I think we had these rough years through the pandemic and through everything eh, happening in the world, the inflation, and now I think people need to have something to look forward to, something to that will impact their lives. And stories like this about Martha and all of the other stories I think are fantastic. Dennis, you've done an absolutely wonderful job. It's Dennis J. Henson. The books are available online. You can go to the website, realimpactbook.com. Find out more and get your free copy. But again, thank you so much for joining me today on Joy on Paper Live. And you make sure you let me know when you have your next book because I want you right back here, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you, Patsy. It was fun.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye bye now. Bye.
Bye.
This book will have a real impact on your life. Please get Kenneth J. Henson's book for yourself or for a friend because everybody needs inspiration. It's filled with stories, poems, and quotes that you can read every day and get inspired. Please subscribe to Joy on Paper Live, and when you make a comment, authors really appreciate it. And when you buy this book on Amazon, please make a lovely review and give him all the stars you can because he certainly has worked very hard on putting together a very readable book, a very enjoyable book, and you will love it. It's called Real Impact, and it is really daily inspiration for you. Thank you for joining me today, and please click that button and subscribe to Joy on Paper Live. Bye bye now.